So this last session here is titled Future-Proofing IT, Future-Proofing Your Business, and you recently published a book on this topic, so I thought it would be good if you kind of kicked us off and started with what you've been thinking about, what's going on, what's in the book, and where it came from.
Yeah, so the book's called Future Proof, which just was perfect for the title of this session.
Yep.
How ironic.
It's not planned at all.
No, it didn't. So it was actually, it's the continuation on a series. So we wrote a book called Building Dragons.
Not we.
We as in me and the co-author Olivier Blanchard. Yeah. And it was about digital transformation in the experience economy. And we set out to write a book because as new technologies keep emerging, we continue to always refer to these kind of unicorn companies as the model of business success. You know, the Ubers and the Facebooks and the Googles, like Airbnb. That's the only way you can be a successful business. But what I believe fundamentally is that there are so many companies that have been around for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years and more that have done tremendous things and that have the opportunity to continue to do tremendous things. So we kind of leaned on two things. One is we wanted to better understand how experiences versus products and services are going to drive the future of business. And two, we wanted to explore the different technologies and how those technologies are specifically impacting business. So we did that, but there was a third thing we wanted to do and we didn't do it in the first book. And that was we wanted to be able to give people some practical guidance on what the keys are to digital transformation. So the subtitle of Future Proof is the 7 key pillars to digital transformation success.
There you go. So maybe the new unicorns, we were chatting about this yesterday, but maybe the new unicorns are actually companies that are 50 years old and adapt and innovate and stay ahead and keep going versus the brand new idea. If you look at, I was asked this earlier, if you look at Intel and some of the work that we've done in the last several years, I think we've become far more open to a lot of different styles of solution delivery and architectures, which helps us better address customer needs versus getting stuck in just the one thing we've always done and known. So there is an adaptability element that's certainly built in. What are the 7 principles that you outline in your book?
All right, I'll share those. But just one last comment. A couple of your partners, by the way, are tremendous at this. In the last few years, Microsoft has completely reinvented themselves, and in a very impressive way. And I know they're a big partner with you guys. And HP, I hosted reInvent, and I got to talk to some people, including some Intel people at the event. But, how do you grow PCs and print?
Yeah.
You talk about like print. Who prints anything anymore? And yet they're growing the size of the print market.
There you go.
And so it just says possible. These companies are, over 50 years old, and they're continually reinventing themselves. In fact, they called the event reInvent.
There you go.
So the 7 pillars, though, and this is probably maybe even the most interesting thing about it of all is, we spent a lot of time here talking about technology. And so we explored hundreds of companies and went deep into more than 20 companies and looked at what were these 20 companies that everybody, talks about. They're so great. This company's amazing. And I'm not even going to name them all for you right now, but just think of the companies you guys use constantly in examples and hear on stages like this all the time. And technology is a piece of it. But there was 7, and it came down to experiences, which we talked about. People, experiences are the highest on the value chain. Experiences over products and services and commodities. People will pay more. That's why people pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for a day at Disney World to ride on rides that are, inferior to other theme parks around the world. They are. But they understand things better. And then it's people, change, innovation, technology, leadership and transformation, and culture. And those were the 7. And just to be really clear, none of the great companies, not one that we identified, did all 7 well. So all of them, and to like what Andrew said this morning, you can be really good at 1 or 2 things, and that might carry you a long way.
Yeah, clearly. You got some examples there. I know, so before I had the role that I have now, managing products at Intel, I was in Intel IT for 5.5 years, and I was doing global infrastructure and operations and engineering. And during our cloud transformation, culture was the bigger barrier than the technology was. I mean, Intel's a technology company on top of a desire to be a leader in IT, and so we had a lot of the work figured out about how to build a cloud infrastructure to change our application delivery models. But the hardest part was getting the teams and the folks that were responsible for that application delivery to see it and move forward and fundamentally change the way that they get work done. And I would say when we started, it was probably the lowest on the level of concerns. It wasn't until we got into it that it jumped to the top and became a much more important aspect and somewhere we needed to fundamentally invest in.
Yeah, I work with a number of the world's largest companies. I spend a lot of time in tech, Lisa, and the first question I almost always get asked is digital transformation, where do I start?
Yep.
And usually when they ask me that, it's someone saying, what's the first technology I need to spend money on? Is it investing in big data, going big with big data? Is it AI?
Yep.
Is it, deploying new cloud workloads?
Yeah.
What is it? And I always turn to them and I say, you're not going to probably love my answer, but I always tell them you got to start with culture. And I'll give you one quick tidbit on that is, you've heard the data points come out about 50% of IT projects failing. How many of you guys have heard that stat? 50% of IT projects fail. If you haven't heard that stat is not new. It's been out there a little while.
Yep.
But do you really think 50% of technology is inferior? Do you really think people buy half the technology, that people go off the shelf, or that they work with great companies, or not, but to buy, it doesn't, the fact is that if you sit down with the decision makers, if you sit down with the users at the end of an IT project that's considered a failure, and you ask them what went wrong, very rarely was it that the new technology wasn't good enough to help. It was the people. Yeah. It was the people and the culture, and when people are scared and they don't understand why change is going to help them, they retract.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's not easy to do all seven, and culture is not always even the first, but it can end up being the most important ultimately to success in that space.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And in my book, I talk a lot about data-driven, which is something I kind of want to pitch a question maybe back at you, right? Because you talk to a lot of companies, and in your everyday, you guys have such a huge partner ecosystem, right?
We do.
I was laughing, I did a bunch of podcasts throughout the day, and I said, you remember the old BASF commercials, we don't make a lot of the things you use, we make a lot of the things you use better. In a lot of ways, the Intel Inside's kind of similar in that way, is that a lot of people are procuring, whether it's Xeon Scalable or some of the solutions you're developing for AI, and it's being embedded into new solutions that you'll use, and you don't always know. Yep. People don't always know it's Intel. So, I talk a lot about data-driven mindsets, though, in my company. And how do you think, I guess you would say the investment strategy needs to be put into companies for them to start to see returns on this data-driven investment? Well,
going back to your first question, you said you get asked a lot when people say, what technology should I invest in? And you say you're not going to like my answer, start with culture. You should still say Xeon Scalable as your first answer, and then you can loop back to culture if you want to.
Someone joked with me, they told me, there was this graphic designer that told me, because I work with all the tech companies, she's like, you should just tattoo the brands on your head. Because you got
you have
I've got a head for it.
Clean work surface.
Mr. Clean.
Yeah, you have a clean work surface. We could do something there. Shift tattoos later tonight. Just don't let me keep selling it on the evening. But joking aside, on the data-driven, we've talked about this all day, and Amir was out here, and the teams were out here talking about how to begin in artificial intelligence, where to go, and then you hear from some of the absolute leaders in the industry. I do think it's important to not let the complexity of it become overwhelming as well. Just making progress along that continuum of artificial intelligence, starting as analytics even, getting into further advancements there, and then driving into true AI as it makes sense for your business. There's not more data that companies need to generate. It's just better utilization of the data. And so we've done some research, and we've worked out with the industry about percentage of data that's out there that actually gets used. And the percent that's analyzed is under 5%, and the percent of all the data in the world that's analyzed in some form is under 5%. And the percent that actually gets utilized to drive a decision is less than 1%. That's kind of crazy when you think about the data complexity challenge. So I think there's a lot that people can start to do now with the assets that they already have that will allow them to make a lot better use of what's already in their infrastructure.
Yeah, what I always say is another thing about starting small is starting with projects that are manageable, right? The old adage, how do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time, right? So many times people are like, well, how do I get started with big data? And it's like, we want to deploy a big data strategy. And so instead of, looking at maybe one problem they can solve, because digital transformation holistically is, generating more revenue, creating more profits, reducing attrition, improving customer experience, making your employees happier. Yep. That's why you transform. So maybe starting with asking that, you start with the right questions, Lisa. And so often I think we say we start with a technology problem.
There you go.
And people don't invest in technology to solve technology problems. They invest in technology to solve business problems.
Yeah. So you asked, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? The more important question today is, how do you eat a cricket? Do you want to guess what the cricket was in out there?
Oh, well, I'm going to cheat because I got to interview Mitch.
No.
Did you guys hear that? Did you guys hear that? Okay,
So,
let's poll the audience. How many of you guys are going to eat cricket protein shakes?
How many of you don't know if you already did or not? You can't tell if I'm joking.
Well, they say you swallow a few spiders every year.
Yeah.
So
it was in the hummus. Who had hummus? I am totally messing with you guys. There was no cricket product served at all today. You are completely safe. I'm sure that will be coming soon, like Shift 2018 maybe will be the cricket products. But I had teased the snack that there was going to be a cricket surprise.
When we were at the Dell IQT day,
Yeah.
they did a vertical farming session. They talked about this
cool.
new 95% reduction in water and this tech to create kale.
Yeah.
And at lunch, we had the kale salad, and it was salad, it was grown with all the reduced water, reduced energy. It was terrific. I mean, so tech can make a huge difference because they did say it was 95% less water.
It can make kale taste good?
Well, does anybody think kale tastes good?
Okay.
Kale makes you feel good.
Okay, you liked it. Yes, okay. All right. So moving on from what we've served everyone today. So you had a chance this morning and then through the day, doing your podcast, all of that, to engage with some of the audience and ask them a few questions. And I thought you might want to share with what you heard from the folks that you were out chatting with.
I was just going to take my phone out and text some people.
Oh, okay. Sorry if we're
This
keeping
is ad lib. Yeah, so it was really kind of cool this morning at 8 a.m. You guys been here since really early, so the good news is on the tail end of this, right?
We're nearly
There's
done.
a reception, there's some drinks, we're going to have some fun. But what we did, we ended up polling a bunch of people. I don't know how many of you are still here. And we asked them some questions about their business transformation, about utilization of AI, because one of the comments we heard over and over, and actually Daniel Herb, who was just up on stage, I had the chance to interview him, and I'm going to start with the end.
Okay.
Here. And I asked him, I said, what did you want to get out of today? Like, you take a whole day to leave the office and to come here. What did you want to get? And he said to me that the number one things he wanted to see was he wanted to hear from his peers. He wanted to see how they're approaching IT and digital transformation and making real change happen and putting these technologies to use, which oftentimes we don't have the chance to make happen. So I asked Tim Crawford, is Tim in the room still?
I can't see anyways.
I can't really see, but that's okay, Tim. I'm not judging you for leaving. I asked him, I said, about AI, and Tim's the CIO of a company called Avoa, and I said, where is AI in your business, and when will we be able to embrace it? And Tim basically, he said the biggest challenge he sees for AI is people still not fully understanding what it is, fully understanding the difference between analytics and AI, and he believes that when AI starts to truly do things that you can't just do by adding more humans, more automation, is when we're going to really start to see the game-changing possibilities of AI. So I thought that was kind of an interesting takeaway. And really what was interesting to me, Lisa, is that a lot of people still don't fully know the difference between artificial intelligence and advanced analytics.
And I agree, but I also sometimes think we get wrapped around that, again, in the tech industry when what matters is moving, again, through that value chain of harnessing the data and the assets that you have to get better experiences, better insights. And we've talked about this. Fundamentally, every application will have artificial intelligence built into it. It's not if, it's just when. There won't be any aspect of the industry or any industry that doesn't have an artificial intelligence element into its digital infrastructure. And so I think if you think about it as a, for sure, end state, that it helps bring a little bit more clarity to what you're starting on today, whether that is building artificial intelligence capabilities on top of your own, Hadoop cluster, data lake, big data type infrastructure, or you're starting something brand new. Just with the cloud, it started in consumer usages and consumer applications, and we've seen that start happening already, and it will move into industrial and B2B in the same, wave and sweep. I mean, it's why we're investing so heavily in it too. There's a ton of infrastructure out there that's already built on Intel and is ready to be utilized to kind of fuel this next wave of change that's coming.
Well, speaking of the cloud, I had two more interesting conversations. I'll just share them both together, and we can talk about that briefly here. But so Mark Melvin is the CTO of E+, and I asked him about how he's approaching workload placement in his environment. And he gave some of the best answers and the most profound answers were very simple. He said, taking it workload by workload, looking at one workload at a time, and then considering security, considering capacity, considering scale and compliance, and then deciding, should we be on-prem or off-prem? So I thought that was a pretty interesting answer. And then I talked to Deloitte. I talked to Randy Ronk at Deloitte, and I asked him what's one area of tech investment to advance a company goal. And, got a consultant's answer in a lot of ways, and he talked about cost savings and how so many of the tech investments are about, saving and creating, visible savings, operational savings. And I like that answer, but he did say, he goes, this is driving the procurement of new technology. He said he's seeing AI being invested in because companies think they can save. Seeing robotics and automation in things like manufacturing because he believes companies can save. And I was fortunate enough to have a dozen more of these kinds of conversations. It's just lots of really great answers. I love doing research and writing books.
Man on the street.
Because there's nothing else I like to do more.
Well, I do think there's a fundamental misperception that the enterprise need for IT is shrinking or something like that. It might be certain IT budgets are shrinking, but the way that IT is delivered in companies now comes from the business side just as much as it comes from IT, so it is a partnership. If you look at compute demand, we see compute demand in the enterprise space growing at a 49% CAGR, and that's out through 2021. So that's a tremendous amount of new compute required every year just to service existing application use cases and then build new ones. So there's a really high level of demand. How it will get serviced might be very different than it was in the past, and that's going to what Mark's point was about what you're going to deliver through a cloud service provider and what you're going to deliver through your own infrastructure. So people have choices that are real and viable now.
Yeah, and we've done some research actually just recently on IT, OT, and where the spend's going and how and some of the findings were actually quite fascinating. I don't know how many of you guys are deploying IoT projects and dealing with the IT, OT convergence and divide to some extent. But one thing I'll give a little tidbit to everybody in the crowd that was kind of funny was that IT overwhelmingly believed that OT was more in line with them than OT believed in IT. So IT people said OT is buying in and working well and we're collaborating and it's working. And OT was like, this is not working very well at all. And, of course, it's one study, but it was a very interesting finding because I said, if nothing else, take that back to IT and say, hey, there's still room to grow and to become more collaborative and take these silos down as edge, cloud, and core become key to new strategies. Well,
and that's fundamental to IT, viewing all of the new opportunities as your customers. They are. So when you sit in IT, the business is your customer. So it's good perspective. All right. Well, that's good. Thank you for going out there and meeting the people. Is there anything you want to leave us with that you've noticed from today and in accordance and together with your book, or any other last thoughts of wisdom you have?
Well, I mean, we're all looking to future-proof our business. And the truth is, if any of us could truly prognosticate what the future would look like, we'd probably do things completely different. But I just want to say, just spending time here and talking, I learned so many great things about, the hippo analogy this morning. The highest paid person with opinion. This is so true. I talked about the research with IT/OT. I talked about the research around culture. But if there's one thing I could really advise people beyond culture is going data-driven. And going data-driven is beyond just using data. Because the thing is, you and I know this, is you can skew data to tell you whatever it is you want to believe and want to hear. So companies that are truly maximizing data aren't just using data and aren't just claiming to be data-driven. They are truly removing as much as possible the bias from their data to start to ask the right questions about how do I create better customer experiences, how do I grow my profits and revenues, how do I make my customers happier, and how do I create employees that love what they do. Because if those four things are at the core of your digital transformation strategy, you will be amazed at how easy it is to deploy technology.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. The cloud A/B test and the cloud service provider's use of A/B testing is like the data cannot lie in that statement about what your users click, what they take, what they move forward, and it is one of those things that absolutely separates out from who is going to stay and grow and remain and become truly an internet company and who's a brick and mortar that has a website. So. It's all related. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for having me.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And I think we're ready now to officially and really wrap up the day. So thanks for coming,
Lisa,
Daniel.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you a little bit later. Be around to ask questions.